Right now, the day's biggest news stories from a Vegas perspective. This is the Vegas Take with Sharp and Shapiro.
All right, welcome to the Vegas Take. Hump Day, baby. It's on a Wednesday. Glad you could join us. Oh, boy, do we have a jam-packed show for you. Big issue in the Supreme Court, gay rights. Should you be allowed to fire somebody from their job based on their sexual preference? We'll get to that coming up here in a little bit. Are the Oakland A's moving to Las Vegas? We're going to get an insider from the RJ to talk a little bit about that situation. The band Live, they've sold millions of albums across the world, really. They were the Rolling Stone Artist of the Year in the 90s. The guitarist for that band, Chad Taylor, going to be joining us. They got a show at the Joint at the Hard Rock Friday. But I don't want to waste any time here because I'm a big fan of this person who is on the show with us. They're going to be coming up with us here in a second. She has a hit show on Fox Business. I grew up watching her as an MTV VJ for years. That's back in the day when I used to watch MTV. They don't really play music anymore, but awesome to have her on the show right now, Kennedy. Kennedy, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Oh, how are you?
Doing good.
Ryan.
Good for you to come on. We appreciate it. By the way, that's true. I did grow up watching you on MTV for many years. I know we have a lot of serious subjects to talk about, but before we get there, I got to say, what happened to MTV, man? I mean, there was so much great music videos back in the day. Alternative rock was at its peak. And now it's like all reality TV. Do you watch MTV at all anymore?
No, I haven't. It's not for me, and that's what MTV is. It belongs to every generation, and then they pass the torch. And once MTV realized that they could make a lot more money with long form programming, they abandoned the videos because they only ran about 3.5 minutes each, and if people didn't like them, they would just tune out. That's
a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. When do you think it was the era when, the boy band era and alternative rock went away and it was more, do you think it's when Britney Spears, hit the stage in sync? When was that moment in time where you said, okay, music is now changing forever?
It's funny because there's a really famous story about Janie Lane going into Donnie Einer's office. I believe it's Sony, and he used to have a warrant poster over his desk, and then it changed to Alice in Chains, and he said that was the moment he knew that metal was dead.
Wow.
And that grunge had taken over. And mine was, I went into Patty Galuzzi's office in 1997, and she had a Spice Girls poster. And I was like, what the hell is that? And she was like, it's the Spice Girls. And I was like, oh my God. And that was the beginning of the end of the grunge alternative era, which had a nice long run alongside hip hop and R&B, and a lot of the genres sort of crossed over into each other before Linkin Park.
Mm-hmm.
And if you listen to a soundtrack for a movie called Judgment Night, it was the first time they had rap and rock and hard rock sort of all on the same soundtrack. And it's a great soundtrack. It's really, really interesting. And that sort of launched an amalgamative movement.
Yeah, those were the good old days, that's for sure. I sound old saying that, but if you're just joining us, Kennedy, a hit show on Fox Business at 9 p.m. Eastern time during the week. Okay, Kennedy, so there's not many people like you that, you make a name for yourself as an MTV VJ, and then you switch up to politics, and now you work for Fox Business. What made you decide to make that transition from music to politics?
When I left MTV, I was living in Seattle and started doing talk radio. And I had been really into politics in high school, and then started working in music in radio at KROQ in Los Angeles right after high school, but had stayed really engaged and interested in politics the entire time, and talked about politics a lot on MTV. And those were really my two driving passions. And when I got to Seattle on my talk radio show, I would interview a lot of musicians, but also got into a lot of politics and a lot of libertarian politics. And it was a really interesting city and a great time to do that. because when you get outside of Seattle, that's when the politics get much more interesting because it's very predictably liberal, like San Francisco or Berkeley.
Yeah.
But outside of there, you have more survivalist libertarians, and it was a good time. It was the late 90s, and we were about to leave the Clinton era, and we didn't know exactly where we were going to go.
Wow. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Kennedy. By the way, I was unaware of this. Our program director reminded me that you were actually here at the KDWN studios with Brian Kilmeade earlier this year. So you are familiar with the KDWN studios here in Las Vegas.
And the maze, yes.
Yes.
It's very difficult finding a way around that, and I think they do that to thin the herd. I bet that you had a lot more employees and they just got lost and died somewhere in the hallways. But
well,
yes, I have been there.
There's a funny story real quickly. I'll share with you what you're talking about. I'm sure you've heard of him. He's Las Vegas Aces head coach, a former Detroit Piston, Bill Laimbeer. So my co-host is bringing him up to the studios, and as he's trying to get him out of the building, it takes him 5 minutes. He gets lost, and Laimbeer was so pissed off. Anyway, just a really funny story.
You know what? As a Trailblazer fan, I have to say I hope Laimbeer was one of those people who got lost forever.
That's awesome. I like that. He also accused my co-host of being an Obama lover. He said some disparaging things about my co-host. But anyway, we'll move on. Let's talk about some serious subjects. I really want to get your opinions on some of this stuff. Let's start with the impeachment inquiry. It's all over the place, everywhere. So my basic question to you, and I guess it's a loaded question, what do you make of this impeachment inquiry? Do you think this is a serious thing after reading the transcript? Do you think what Donald Trump has done, based on the information we know right now, was inappropriate? What are your thoughts on this?
I do think what he did was weird. I think he has to stop going on TV and asking foreign countries for help investigating Joe Biden. I do agree with Ben Sass that that's what the American courts are for. And there was an article today in the New York Times that said what Hunter Biden did wasn't illegal, but it should be, and they should change the laws to make it so.
I don't disagree with
illegal.
That. Yeah.
But right now it's not an impeachment inquiry. It's just because you say, I wave my speaker's wand and it's an impeachment inquiry. That is not so.
Right.
Like, launch a formal impeachment inquiry, have a vote on it, and start gathering information and, have a formal process with parameters if you're really going to honor the Constitution, because Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff are out there talking about, the founders, and this is what the founders were guarding against.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, if that's the case and you want to use formal language and invoke the birth of the Constitution, then you should follow your own breadcrumb trail.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Are you surprised, though? People like Mitch McConnell, people like Lindsey Graham, they come out and talk about the withdrawing of troops in Syria, and they go out against the president on that very strongly. Are you surprised that they are very consistent with the troops, but yet when it comes to this impeachment inquiry, they don't say what you said? They don't say, well, I don't think it's an impeachable offense, but it was certainly inappropriate. They won't even go that far. Are you surprised?
Sometimes, but this is a tricky administration, and for people who want to stay on the president's good side, they have to say the right thing. And and then there are people who have given up, like Jeff Flake, who's obviously no longer in Washington.
Right.
So it's a weird line to toe, but I don't agree that we should be all over the Middle East, but I do agree that we shouldn't be taking foreign policy direction from Turkey.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Hillary Clinton. There are rumors, speculation, I guess you could say. She's not saying she's not going to enter the race. In fact, she tweeted out to Donald Trump yesterday, "Don't tempt me," when Trump was talking about her possibly running instead of Joe Biden. Do you think, Kennedy, there is any chance that Hillary Clinton could be running against Donald Trump in 2020? What do you make of this?
It has nothing to do with Joe Biden. It has everything to do with Liz Warren. And Democrats have everything in Liz Warren they didn't have in Hillary Clinton. And they are not going to abandon her in favor of Hillary, because 71% of Democrats do not want Hillary Clinton to run. And that's because she blew it. She had a sure thing.
It's true.
She had a layup, and she missed.
You're right.
And Elizabeth Warren has worked very hard carving out policy positions that Hillary Clinton never bothered to, and has a consistency and an authenticity that Hillary Clinton will never have. And she also happens to be a woman.
Mm-hmm.
So Liz Warren has worked very, very hard to get where she's at. And I cannot imagine in any universe where after going through this crucible of the democratic process, she would step aside for a two-time loser. And I don't blame her. But I would love to see Hillary lose again. I would love to see her get in the race just to see her not get the nomination. That would be the most satisfying ending to this entire saga.
I don't think I've ever heard a Republican say that. I mean, I've heard Republicans say they'd like to see Hillary run again because Donald Trump would destroy her, but I've never heard anybody say spitefully they wanted her run so they can see her lose again. I actually think that's funny. Okay, I like this.
I'm not even a Republican. I'm an unaffiliated voter.
Right.
I'm registered in California, and I'm a libertarian. So I have a lot of problems with the Republican Party and the way they spend money, and it's completely immoral. And I think many of them have abandoned their conservative principles.
We both agree on this. Okay, I like this. This is Rapid Fire with Kennedy. Let's talk a little bit about. I'm not a very religious person. Let's talk a little bit about Ralph Reed and the comments that he made. I don't know if you heard about this, Kennedy, but he said people need to render to God and vote for Trump and support Trump. He also used the word be obedient to Trump, which I think is absolutely absurd and ridiculous. What do you make of these Ralph Reed comments?
He's just trying to get attention.
You think that's it, huh?
Yeah, I do. I think that Ralph Reed is not really a part of the political conversation anymore. And, I don't think we need to be obedient to our president. And if your faith informs your politics, I think that's fantastic. But that does not have to be the case for everyone. And we don't all have to view the presidency through the same prism.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. All right, let's talk a little bit about Matt Lauer here. He's in the news this morning, sadly, again. Now he's being accused of raping an NBC colleague. Now, there have been people on big networks that have been accused of this and sexual misconduct. What do you make of this latest story involving Matt Lauer, accused of a very serious crime, rape?
I think it's an interesting turn in the Me Too era because a lot of people thought that if you just stayed quiet, that was the best thing to do. And that's essentially what Matt Lauer did. And now he's defending himself. The problem for Matt Lauer is not this one story, which, he claims and he says he can corroborate the fact that this was an ongoing month-long extramarital affair that continued after Sochi. And the problem for him is that there were many other women who accused him of egregious sexual assault, including a woman who apparently had to be carried out of his office unconscious because she was so filled with trauma and anxiety that she let go of consciousness after an alleged sexual assault. So he has a lot more to answer for than just this. But if someone feels like they've been falsely accused, there are times where you have to stand up and defend yourself.
Yeah, no question. So I guess I have to ask you this. At any point in your career anywhere, have you ever been the victim of this? Has anyone ever said anything that was so over the top to you, not necessarily even touching, but in any situation? Has anyone said something to you where you had to report something in your career?
No, I've never reported anything, but on my show, we have a safety zone where we are allowed to say really outrageous things because that's part of our creative process. And we have to be able to do that. And, there are times with your friends that you have to be able to say horrific things in order to make each other laugh, especially in this environment. And it doesn't make you a bad person.
Right.
We have to have our personal free speech zones. But if someone said something stupid to me, I would verbally swat them down. And, people say dumb things. Thankfully, I have not been assaulted in the workplace. And
well, we're glad to hear that.
I have a great deal of sympathy for some of the vulnerable women that I know who have been. And it does take a lot of courage for them to step forward because there's always the worry that you are going to be silently retaliated against and not promoted and not included. So it's a fine line, but you have to protect yourself. You have to be your own best advocate.
Right.
But at the same time, we can't live in a totally bubble-wrapped society, and we can't treat words as deeds.
I agree. I guess this will be my last question for you, Kennedy, and I think it's an important one. I think there's a definition of a journalist and then someone who shares opinions. For example, I'll go to CNN. Don Lemon, he's not a journalist, even though he might call himself one. He does an opinionated show. Same thing with Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity, right? They share their opinions. And then you have somebody like Shep Smith, who I respect, but at times Shep Smith fact checks people that do the opinionated shows. How do you feel about that, about somebody like a Shepard Smith, who is a journalist, I believe, but sometimes does interject his opinions and does say, well, Sean Hannity did this or Laura Ingraham did this. How do you define what is a journalist and what is not a journalist? And how do you feel about somebody like Shepard Smith fact checking others who do opinionated shows like yourself?
Shep has strong feelings about a lot of stuff, but he is one of the finest journalists that I know, and he is so incredible at breaking news, and he is able to paint a three-dimensional picture out of his own mental constructs, meaning he doesn't need a teleprompter. He can tell you exactly what's happening and lay it out for you in a way that I don't think there are many other people who are capable of doing that. I do think that we are in such a highly agitated state right now that people get very defensive. And, I think that Shep is within his right to run his show the way he wants to. And there are times where he's passionate and he has a very loyal following.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there's a lot of people at Fox News that are very Wallace, I think, is another one. Brett Baer. There's a lot of people over there at Fox News that I respect, as do I at CNN as well. Well, Kennedy, thank you so much for taking some time to join us. Real quickly, before we let you go, I want to plug your show. It's a fantastic show on the Fox Business, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. Tell us a little bit about it quickly here, if you can.
No, we have a great time, and the vibe of the show is like having a great dinner conversation with people that you may not know. They may have different jobs or different beliefs, but we can all get together and have a high energy, spirited conversation. Maybe we don't always get along, but that at the end of the show, we're still going to go to the bar together.
And that's what I love about what you do, Kennedy. I've been a big fan of your career for a very long time, going back to the MTV days. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do here. I'm going to talk to some people here in this building and see if they can maybe unmaze this building for you next time you're here, okay?
Yeah, seriously, just, I need a headlight, some spelunking gear, and then I'll make it through.
Sounds good. Well, Kennedy, we'd love to have you on again sometime. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian. Take care.
Right, you too. All right, there you go. Kennedy from the Fox Business Network. I'm being real, man. I used to love watching her. I had a big crush on her, by the way, growing up, watching her as an MTV VJ. And she does a great job on Fox Business. That is a very difficult transaction to make. When you're talking about music, you're like a Kurt Loder, and you're doing something on MTV, and then you're able to make a transition and do it very, very well to the political spectrum and the political world. That is an extremely difficult thing to do. And she's done it very, very well, and she's extremely intelligent. And really appreciate her taking some time to join us. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Be back right after this. You're listening to The Vegas Take right here on the all-new 101.5 FM, 720 AM, KDON.